Going back again, yeah, this is really nice. It's in club, because we haven't seen it.
Okay. Now, where did you actually go?
Steve saw it.
Okay. Started 9:15, I'll give you a 2-minute grace period. And we start at 9:70.
Sorry, twice in one. Yes. Like the first one day. Yeah. And we're at 30 miles, that's very true.
Okay. We've been doing,
Yes.
what we've been doing is, we've been looking at first off, we've been going over the various elements and aspects of exegesis. And then we decided after going through those, we were going to pick some passages. Joe Sollenberger chose Genesis 6:1-4, which you have found it to be interesting. We're about ready to finish this one up. But what we've done is we've gone through the verses almost verse by verse, and what has happened is various aspects of exegesis have come up. We've dealt with the text and translation of it and of the text, and we looked at the footnotes, and we've gotten into some Hebrew and some, hi Linda, we've gotten into some of the various things such as the sons of God and the daughters of Adam and the Gibborim and the Nephilim and the men of Hashem. So we've gotten into some of those things. And then we've gotten into the biblical context to a bit. We'll do that a little bit more literary context. And then last week we talked about some of the literary characteristics. We talked about, okay, we have Genesis 6:1-4. What literary genre do we have? And do you remember what we talked about? Etiology, the story of origin. And how do we explain that Genesis 6:1-4 is a story of origin or an etiology? Hi. Oh, I just blanked on your name while I'm talking. Really? Ann, yes. That happens, you know. You'll be talking and then you'll try to think of someone's name. So what did we come up with last time? What's an ideology, especially when we're talking about Genesis 6 or Genesis, actually chapters 1-11? Because we have a lot of stories of origin. How is Genesis 6:1-4? Well, you have the sons of God who see the daughters of Adam, or daughters of men, or daughters of people. And they're attracted to them. They have children with them. And then when we get to verse 4, it's what do you do with offspring? And because they were Nephilim. What's Nephilim?
It's the tall and giants.
Yeah, giants. Yeah. So the Nephilim are the giants. And so this is a story of origin as to how very large people are on the earth when the rest of us were kind of average. 6 feet. Got people running around who are 7 feet on the basketball court and other places. So, so this is a story of origin in that way. And we have we've gone over other stories of origin in Genesis 1-11. Do you remember what some of those are? In Genesis 3, why do snakes crawl on the ground? Why do women have pain in childbirth? Why are men destined to work and toil with the ground?
Any choice.
Yeah. Yeah, they made a choice. Yeah, we'll someday we'll spend a session talking about the fall. I don't use that terminology. I was talking to a Jewish guy, and actually it was a lecture. He said, "Yeah, we don't see Genesis 1, 2, 3 as the fall. If there was a fall, it will be Genesis 6 with the flood story." I said, no, what you have in Genesis 2 with Adam and Eve and the serpent and the apple, it's not necessarily fall. It's in the sense that they sinned and now humanity is destined to sin themselves. They were created as people, so they made a choice, and as Craig said, and then there were consequences to that choice. So that's how life is. We make choices and there are consequences. Some may be good consequences, some may be consequences we have to learn from. But and then scholars like Ron Rod and Walter Brueggemann, he really went after it and said, had 5, 6, 7 reasons as to why this is not a fall. In Genesis 3, there's no, the word sin isn't used, number one, and there's no terminology of a fall in that chapter. But that's another discussion, but I just throw that in there because in Christianity, people throw around the term fall as everyone knows what that means. And number one, I don't believe it. Number two, people mean different things from it. Okay, so in etiology, you seem pretty quiet on this one, but are you with me on this or not? Then we talked about how when we get, and this kind of moves us into what I was just saying about Genesis 3. In verses 1 and 2, you have the people, Adam begins to multiply on the earth. And then the sons, and they have daughters, and then the sons of God see the daughters of Adam and they are attracted to them. So they have children. And then the question that the narrative raises is what, and it doesn't raise it in a direct way, but you're left hanging with it. Who are the offspring from the sons of God and the daughters of Adam? Who are they? What are they going to be? Divine? Are they going to be human? So God jumps in verse 3, and God says, look, my spirit is not going to dwell or remain in Adam. And I don't know what your translations say. Some say mortals, and there's a reason for that. Some say men, I guess. What are your other translations say? My spirit will not, human beings. Yeah, the newer translations are going to translate Adam as humans or people.
And man
Mortals, yeah. What's that, John?
will not contend with man.
Yeah, man. So Adam is being translated, my spirit will not remain. And I think one reason, I don't know your first name. Cindy. One reason, Cindy, that it says mortals is we're dealing here with the issue of mortality and immortality. Really. So when God says my spirit isn't going to remain in Adam forever, it's going to be about 120 years. And again, that's just a round figure, just sort of figure out. But it's really clarifying the confusion or ambiguity between or regarding what this offspring's going to be between the divine beings, the sons of God, and the daughters of Adam. They're going to be human, no question. They're not gonna be divine beings, they're gonna live about 120 years and that's it. So the whole notion of mortality and immortality is addressed right there. God jumps in there and the speech kind of comes out of nowhere because if you look at verses 1 and 2 and 4, that's kind of the narrative. And then you have a speech by God in verse 3 that kind of sneaks in there. And some commentators say that it's an interruption of the narrative of 1, 2, and 4. It's almost out of place, but it's the writer's way, the narrator's way of setting limits and boundaries and clarifying things. The offspring between the sons of God and daughters of men, it's going to be, they're going to be human. Yeah.
I know that I'm in this class very short. Who are the sons of God?
The sons of God are really divine beings. We've talked, and there have been several theories. They could be, some think they were humans. Some people thought they were angels, but the role of an angel, the malach or the malachim, the Hebrew word, they were really messengers. So they don't serve that role here in this passage. And so the sons of God, this terminology, it occurs in Job, and it also occurs in Psalm 29. And in those contexts, it is used as divine beings. So it would be, for the most part, the religion we have here in the Old and the New Testament in the Bible is classified as a monotheistic religion where God is it. But we have passages where God is not alone up in the heavenly realms. So there are either the sons of God or other divine beings. So you have this divine counsel or divine entourage, and it's not really specified. And we believe that these are things from other cultures at that time that are seeking in there. Because Genesis 1 to 11, it's not until you get to chapter 12 in Genesis that you start to see a narrative that begins to look at how people lived in the 18th century, which will be Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, and so forth. So Genesis 1 to 11, you do see some, and it's been a controversial word at times, not in this class, but you do see a lot of mythical elements in here. So we call Genesis 1 to 11 the prehistory. All cultures have a prehistory, and it sometimes it has mythology to it, and just it's. And the other thing about Genesis 1 to 11, there's no time frame, there's no historic era to that. It's not till you get to Genesis 12 that you have the era of what we call the patriarchs or the ancestors, and we keep going through the Bible. So the first thing we have to do when we're looking at Genesis 6, 1 to 4 is to put it in its literary context, and we've done it, at other classes. And this shouldn't be new to you, what I've just said, that
Yeah.
I see lots of puzzle faces.
No, it's a nice review.
Yeah.
It's for those of us who have short-term memory.
yeah, there you go. Yeah, we talk about something one week and then okay, you'll go over it tonight because you might not remember it next week. Cindy, did that help at all? Or?
Yes, can I ask a follow-up?
Mhm.
To reference the sons of God as divine has a connotation that doesn't kind of go along with that they saw these women fair and chose them. That doesn't seem.
Why is that? I don't.
I think I think we discussed this, so don't worry, we'll be bringing it back. But remember, we had the whole discussion about what the term fair was. Was it a sexist comment that they were good looking versus,
Well, why would a divine being want a human being anyway? I mean, they're,
Because they were fair.
Oh, they weren't fair.
They were beautiful.
That's not the best translation.
yeah.
They were good. In
But-
fact, they were beautiful.
See, they're nearly divine to start with, Dan.
very good, Craig.
So, and they were attracted. Now, your question, why would they be in the first place? Well, many times we get to a narrative, especially in Genesis 1 to 11, and we're left with a lot of those questions. It doesn't say.
It's a story.
Well, it's a story. Yeah, and, okay, so gotta jump in a little head there, and that's fine, so most translations. What do you have?
It's in the RSV.
Yeah, okay, what do some of the other translations have for fair? When the sons of God saw the daughters of Adam.
Beautiful.
Attractive. Attractive.
Beautiful.
Beautiful. See, and the Hebrew word is tov, and it really means good, tov ma'od, very good. But in this sense, it means more than just fair, more than just good. It means they were,
It means wow.
yeah,
Yeah.
they were,
Last week, Jim Hollinger said his version said hot.
yeah. So, yeah,
I took a little liberty.
yeah. So it means they were attractive, they were hot chicks, whatever you want to say. So,
So divine beings can have lust, is that the bottom line?
could be, but remember, when we get to yeah, so. Again, it's not explained, and I think there's confusion about that. These questions were asked, and then, so the narrator comes in verse 3 and says, okay, we have a problem here. We have divine beings who are fornicating with daughters of Adam. What's that mean? And so God kind of clears it up, and then this whole thing drops out. You never really see this whole thing of the sons of God and the daughters of Adam interacting throughout the rest of the Bible, the Old Testament.
Clear it up.
Huh?
How does God clear it up?
He says the offspring is going to be, they're going to be human.
They
And
won't have God's spirit.
And I'm going, my spirit's not going to dwell in humans or, mortals forever. It's gonna be 120 years, and then they're gonna die. And so the offspring between the daughters of Adam and the sons of God, they're gonna be human. And then it just kind of drops out. The issue doesn't ever come up again.
Is this a way of introducing the idea of mortality?
I think so. And it's limits. It's saying, look, the sons of God and the daughters of Adam, the offspring, what are they going to be? Are they going to be divine? Are they going to be human? Are they going to be a hybrid or what? And I think when I say God clears it up, he comes in and says, they're going to be human. That's it. And it's only one verse. So, it's not like there's a lot of details here. So we have to just kind of read this and read it and say, okay, this is what we think God's doing here. So when I say he's clearing it up, he's clearing up the issue of mortality and immortality. And that's an issue that is running through the mythologies in other religions in this time period. Gilgamesh, from the Mesopotamian story, he was an offspring by the human king and a goddess. So they even said he was 2/3 divine and 1/3 human, all that. So that thing is cropping in, and this was ancient Israel's way of saying, no, we're not having that.
So how,
Okay.
yes, so I guess the word I learned is hypostatic union. So how does that relate to Jesus being human and divine?
Yeah, way to go, Cindy.
Well, that's another discussion, and nothing will stay here, but if you read the Gospel of John, they're, they're one and the same. And Jesus was around, according to John, not so much Mark, but Jesus was around when all this was going on too. So, and this was, so to me, it's not related. This is more mythological issues coming in from other cultures. And when you get to, the epiphany of God and Jesus here on this earth, that's a whole different way, a whole different thing. And it's what allows Christianity to be one of the primary religions in the world. Jim?
If I heard you correctly, you've been saying that verse 3 is seen as not quite belonging with the others.
Yeah.
And to me, it's just part of another story of origin, and it's explaining why there are age limits
There
on
you go.
on people. So in that,
Yeah.
guess in that sense, it's, for me anyway, it seems to fit.
Well, it does fit, but what I'm saying is originally you could take verse 3 out and 1, 2, and 4
Would fit together.
read, well, it fits together and it reads very similar. And then you have a speech by God being inserted in 3 for this exact purpose. As you would say, it's so you have and the etiology you're talking about for me falls into this. It's a narrative of boundaries and limits because when you read about the sons of God and the daughters of Adam and they having offspring, that leaves a lot of open-ended questions. In verse 3, and I keep saying, I think God comes in and clears it up by saying, no, they're not going to be divine, they're going to be human. And that's what happens.
Then we get to the story of flood,
Yes.
and where does that fit?
Okay, well, that takes us to number 3. Another thing I see with this literary genre, or what's going on here from a literary aspect in 1 to 4, is you have in chapters 1 to 4 of Genesis, you have Adam and Eve, and you have Cain and Abel. And then in 6 verse 5, you have a populated earth. How do we get there? We get there with here. Verses 1 to 4. So verses 1 to 4 is your narrative bridge. That is how you get from Adam and Eve and Cain and Abel. They're the only ones, according to that story, that are on the earth. And then how do you get to a populated earth or a populated region, really? And it's because in verse 1, the people, the Adam, began to multiply. Now, how did that happen? Because
Natural way.
well, yeah. So where did the women come from for Cain and for this to really take off? So it just happened. So and again, that's where you're left with a lot of unanswered questions, and if you try to make literal sense out of it, you're not going to be able to. So you have to, then that's where, for me, it helps to call this ancient Israel's prehistory. They just started to multiply. Chris Smither, a blues artist, singer, guitarist, he wrote a song called Origin of the Species, and there's one line in there where talking about Cain and where their wives came from ain't nobody knows. And that's what we're left with. It's so it doesn't explain that, but it does kind of try to explain how we get from Adam and Eve, Cain and Abel, to a populated earth. So this is its narrative bridge.
Hey, Dave,
Yes,
can we fill Dave and Cindy in very quickly how we landed on Genesis 6?
you can. Yeah.
He told us over the summer, explained exegesis over the summer, think of verses that you involve with your mind. And good old Joe
Has somebody picked
Oliver.
this?
Yes, Joe Oliver.
Do you know Joe Soliver?
Joe,
Yeah, I like
Joe
it.
picked this, and this is where we landed.
And he was sitting in that chair next to John and Donna, and he says, "All right, I'm gonna put a passage," because people really weren't coming up with passages. And so I'm gonna put a good one in there. So he came up here, and this is when we had them all listed up. So he wrote Genesis 6:1-4, and he's not here, he's not online, but he has been here, and he's explained. Joe's a chemist, he taught chemistry in high school, and he's really worked hard at trying to reconcile science in the Bible, and he's able to do it, but this passage fascinates him. And he does a lot of work with languages. He doesn't know Hebrew and Greek, but he knows how to use Bible software to get the answers he wants. So,
And how many Bibles he wants?
well,
Don't say that about a campus.
yeah, that's what I'm saying. To get answers that
And he
Makes
has,
sense.
how many Bibles?
oh, he has a lot, over 70. Yeah.
Yeah, he wants to hit 100.
Yeah. So he's into it in a different way than
Yeah.
most of us.
He likes that, yeah.
Okay, so any other, what does that help fill you two in as to how we landed on this crazy passage? And we have been spending some time with it, and I think we did probably a good overview of where we are. Now what we're going to do, because we're toward the end of finishing this up, maybe tonight, well, maybe next week, but what we want to do is look at this passage in its biblical context. And so what we want to do is take some of the themes we find here and we want to see where else they might appear in the Bible.
Dave,
Yeah.
maybe, who that? Cindy, might, like the paper here that helps us out.
Yeah, there's a handout. This is what we started with, and we started going over it before the summer break, and then we really finished it before we delved into this passage. And as I said at the beginning of today's class, those are the aspects of exegesis I'm centering on. And as we've gone through it in kind of a inductive way, these aspects have we've covered it. In fact, we've covered a lot of those just in the last 15 minutes or so. So we're moving, we've dealt with literary context, we dealt with literary characteristics, we've dealt with text and translation, there was footnotes that came up, and we had to bring in the Hebrew at various times to help us to understand certain things. So now we're at the biblical context part of the exegetical process, where are there themes in these four verses that crop up in other passages in the Bible? So the first thing, and this will help with Cindy's first question, one of her first questions, is that where else in the Bible do we have the notion of divine beings, or the fact that God is not alone up in the heavenly realm? So let's look at Genesis 1:26. This is toward the end of the first creation story. So leading up to this, God is creating things on the earth. Let's see, the fifth day, at the end of 23, God made the wild animal. God saw that it was good. And then in verse 26, then God said, let us make humankind. My footnote says, Adam.
Our.
Hmm?
Says our and our.
Yeah, let us make, who's us?
Exactly. So, but we'll answer that again, but let's get the terminology here. Let us make who?
Mankind. Mankind.
Mankind, man. My translation, New RSV, says humankind. And again, it's Adam. I keep using that word. It can mean Adam, but it also means people. And the King James always translated it as mankind or men or whatever, but some of your newer translations are starting to translate it as humans or people. But as long as you understand that mankind means people. And now we're trying to be more inclusive with it, but Adam, just like anthropos in the Greek means people, just doesn't mean males, and Adam doesn't mean males. We have another word in Hebrew for that, which has come up in this passage, ish and isha for woman, but this means man. So let us make humankind in our image. Who's us? As Becky and others have said, asked, who is us?
That's where we get the Holy Spirit from Christ.
Well, you can,
Divine realm.
yeah, see, I don't think we're there yet, Peggy,
Okay.
because, you know, that's something that really doesn't develop until you get into New Testament theology. Now, in the Old Testament, you don't necessarily have the Messiah, but you have God and you have God's Spirit, Ruach, but the whole notion of a Trinity hasn't been developed yet. In fact, that wasn't really developed until after the New Testament was completed. And it sneaks in there in some passages in the New Testament where it would have been added later. So,
My version says majesty.
okay, read it.
Well,
Or is it a footnote?
yeah, it's a footnote. It says, another view is that the plural wording is used to denote majesty. Kings traditionally use the plural form in speaking of themselves. We do know that God's Spirit was present in the creation from Job 33:4 and Psalm 104:30. From Colossians 1:16, we know that Christ, God's Son,
was at work in the creation.
Now, you remember I have talked a lot in this class about the difference between annotated notes and footnotes. So a footnote is from the text itself, which was translated from the Hebrew or the Greek in the New Testament. Then a lot of your Bibles or translations have commentaries or annotated notes off to the side. And so whoever the publisher is of your Bible, they were trying to explain that. So it's not necessarily a footnote in the sense of what does this word mean in the text, but it's more of a commentary to try to explain that. And I think where most people go with this is that there was some, and I think Donna mentioned it, there was some divine realm is in the thought of this passage. And we're going to come up with others, or a divine counsel, or just I say God's heavenly entourage, where yes, God was it, but apparently he was not alone. And there's not a whole lot more than I can say about that. But
And it says in chapter 6 and verse 2, it says the sons of God.
yes.
It talks about the plural
Right.
there.
Mhm.
So.
Well, and it does, and that's why we settled on, we think the sons of God were part of that heavenly entourage. And, but let's go to 3:22 in Genesis. So this is at the end of the second creation story. It's at the end of the narrative in the Garden of Eden. And after a lot of this stuff happens, and then the Lord God said, see, this is my translation, the man, not mine, but the new RSV, the man has become like one of us, knowing good and evil. And now he might reach out his hand and take also from the tree of life and eat and live forever. There's that notion of mortality and immortality. So, and obviously that's not going to happen. You know what happens, they're expelled from the garden. So they can't go into that more mortal or divine realm. So the Lord God said, see, the man has become like one of us, just like let us make Adam in our image. So again, we have this us there. Who is us? It's the so choir, you're singing today.
Yes.
Okay. So we're gonna lose about half of our class, right? Dave.
I'll talk to you later.
Okay. Oh, you're in the choir. Yeah.
Dave, aren't we just dealing with cultures that
Yeah.
did not have trouble with plurality with gods?
That's right.
And even the Hebrew culture had their local gods and their home gods.
Well, not so much the Hebrew culture, but the cultures like the Canaanites, the people who became Israelites, they had some pre-culture. So even you remember Laban, Jacob, and he wants to take Leah and Rachel, is it? Yeah. Yeah, he wants to take them away and go off on his own because he served Laban for 14 years, and he wants to take them and their children off. And Laban says, "Well, you stole the family god." So those are things that are cropping in. You don't see those too much later, and if you do, it's because of an intermixing of religions in that area. So. Now, 11:7, Genesis 11:7. Now, what's going on? This is the story of the tower. You know that story? They're building this tower. And let's go back a little bit. The Lord came down to see the city and the tower which mortals, Adam, had built. And the Lord said, look, they are one people. And they have all one language. And this is only the beginning of what they will do. Nothing that they propose to do will now be impossible for them. Come, let us go down and confuse. Let us go down and confuse their language there, so they will not understand one another's speech. So the whole idea there, and this may or may not make sense, but the whole idea is that we're going to confuse our language so they won't be as unified, because before that, God said, they are one people, they all have one language, and this is only the beginning of what they will do. Propose to do, nothing will be impossible to them. The fear is that they're going to build this tower and it's going to go up to the heavens, and then who knows what will happen then. So, but this is an etiology as to why we have different languages on the earth. Not to be taken literally in a sense, but this is a story of origin, why we have different languages and different dialects. But we still have this notion, come, let us go down and confuse their language. So all the examples we dealt with just now are in this prehistory of Genesis 1 to 11. And it's, and they're talking, God is talking as if he's not alone. That there's an entourage, a divine council, whatever you want to call it, up in the heavenly realm. Now we do have a few other verses that might help us clarify that just a little bit more. So let's go to Psalm 82:1. And I'm really interested in what your various translations say here. I can tell you what the Hebrew said.
What was that? Psalm number what?
82, verse 1. Well, I'm going to read what I have. And again, I'm the New Revised Standard Version, updated edition. God has taken his place in the divine council. In the midst of the gods, he holds judgment. Okay, that's some stuff there. But first, what do y'all have in that first phrase? God has taken his place in the divine council.
Assembly.
Assembly.
Divine assembly.
And assembly.
Say it again, Peggy.
Great assembly.
Great assembly, so it doesn't use the word divine. God has taken his place in the great assembly.
Heaven's court.
Heaven's court, yes. Anybody else? What is the Jerusalem, New Jerusalem? Divine assembly. Divine assembly. Okay, so that's just raising the issue. Now, the Hebrew, it says God is taking his stand or his place in a divine congregation. That's the word I know in Hebrew is congregation, or it can mean gathering. So however you want to look at that, some translators have using the word council or assembly. So something of that nature. So there is something going on in the thought of the
Well, you have to go
ancient,
to the next four words, don't you?
okay,
Among the divine beings.
in the midst of the gods, he holds judgment. What does yours say, Donna?
Among the divine beings.
Okay,
Well, mine says he gives judgment among the gods.
yeah. Does yours have anything? It just says,
Divine beings.
so it doesn't use the word to judge.
Well, then it says he renders judgment.
Okay, okay, say that again then.
Okay. He stands in the divine assembly among the divine beings.
Yeah.
He renders judgment. This is
Okay.
the international. what
And,
is it?
and I mean,
International Standard Version.
oh, international standard, okay. And mine says in the midst of the gods, he holds judgment. And what did you have, Peggy?
Presides in the general assembly, he gives judgment among the gods, and the gods are small g.
Yeah, that's correct. I can count that.
Should be back.
I'll be back.
So, and that's, I don't know that we can go much further than that. I mean, we could spend some time trying to take that apart, but the point here is that there's, again, God's not alone, and there's, well, there are other, divine beings, with God.
Well, what kind of time would have elapsed between the writing of the Psalms and the writing of Genesis? I mean, this is the same idea being carried over.
Well, it's possible, and see, in the writing of Genesis, some of that could have been written relatively late, so, when is a prehistory written? And we haven't gotten into that to what,
After.
yeah, it's written after, see, they're talking about a timeless time, a time that, you know, there's no era, there's no, you can't read Genesis 1 to 11 and say, okay, we're in this time period, we're in the pre-exilic period, we're in the exilic period, or we're in the post-exilic period, where there's no really sense of time here. So a prehistory, as Cindy said, is usually written later to try to, in some way, address people's questions that have come up, but also just most cultures had this, and we've talked about this before, had this need for a prehistory. Not necessarily a literal prehistory, but just a prehistory that says some things that seem to be important to the culture. So what we think is, and I briefly touched upon this, but certainly not enough maybe for it to catch hold, is that you have two narrative strands throughout Genesis 1 to 11. One was written in the 8th century, one was written in the 5th or the 4th century BC. So, and then if we look at David in the 9th century, Moses in the 12th century, so these were written relatively late. They weren't written at the time period that they're expressing. And that can get confusing because we're reading things in Genesis and we're thinking that, well, this Genesis 1 to 11 would have been written first. And it could have been written at the time that Psalm 82 was written, or they could have been written after Psalm 82. So we really don't know. And the Psalms are very hard to date. And a lot of people want to Because 73 of the 150 Psalms in the book of Psalms are attributed to David. And you will hear many people say, well, David wrote this psalm and these 73 Psalms David wrote. Well, it's almost impossible that one person could have written those 73 Psalms, and then David himself, if he was a shepherd, he was probably illiterate, but not everyone believes that. Some people believe David wasn't a shepherd and that he came out of a royal family, but that just gets so confusing. So it's hard to date the Psalms. Glenn?
Well, looking specifically at the one on Psalms 82.
Yeah.
It's talking about judging the different nations. And
Yes.
in this time, as I understand it, each little culture, each little ethnic group had their own god.
Mhm.
And the god of the Mountjoyans and the god of the Elizabethonians and the god of the
There you go.
Theoconians. And then by the time you get to Greek and Roman culture, each household had its own
Yeah.
god. So I kind of, in this sense, I don't think that they're talking about our Israelite God is a collection of gods. He's talking about among all the gods of these other nations, our God is the one that passes the judgment on the other gods.
Yeah, and that's possible. So it's God has taken his place in the divine council, which could include God being the or being the ultimate, and then giving judgment to the other gods that people are ascribing to.
This isn't a description of God with a capital G. This is just an acknowledgement to the culture and religious landscape of the time that people understood the gods to be the god of their ethnic tribe.
Yeah. It's
That's
very,
not
very
the way it
possible.
reads.
Huh?
It reads a lot more, he's equal to, he's taking a seat
Yeah,
in the assembly, and among the divine, among them,
yeah.
he renders judgment.
Yeah, but that's different than what mine says, where he presides over. You see, mine says he presides over, yours says he's taking a seat.
Yeah.
He presides over and gives judgment.
Okay, the Hebrew says that God has taken his stand, or he has taken his place. So he's taking his seat, whatever it is, it's his position in the divine gathering, assembly, whatever you want to call it, in the midst of gods, and then he gives judgment. So,
Mine says surrounded by the gods with a small.
okay, now that word surrounded is not here in the Hebrew. In fact, what you have, it's a verbless clause to a point, in the midst of the gods. So the word in the midst, your translation is translating in the midst as surrounding, and that's not a bad translation. No. That's just another way of saying
But
it.
that levels the playing field, or peggy bread,
Good.
that changes it.
Yeah. Yes. So it's kind of ambiguous here with the Hebrew. The Hebrew here is allowing for both, and it's not nailing down. So, and that's why we have different translations, because there was, and one of my professors in graduate school would say there are some translations who can only translate this one way, because their
Go down to verse 6.
theology will only allow them to do that. Well, okay. Verse 6.
Indeed, I said, you are gods, and all of you are sons of the Most High.
Keep reading.
Nevertheless,
Right.
you shall die like mortals and fall like any prince. So yeah, in this theme of God versus other gods, it comes up in 2nd Isaiah, Isaiah 40 to 5. But the last one I want to look at, and this might confuse things a little bit with this one, is 29:1.
Psalms.
Psalm 29:1, sorry. $29.1. This is an old word we probably don't use very often, and I don't know, some of your translations may clean it up a little bit. But ascribe to the Lord, or give, really what it means. Ascribe to the Lord, O heavenly beings. Now, that's the B'nai Elohim. That's what the same phrase we have in Genesis 6:2, sons of God. Do any of your verses have sons of God here? No. What do you have? I have heavenly beings. Everyone,
Mighty ones.
mighty ones,
Divine,
divine beings, or just divine?
divine beings.
So ascribe to the Lord of heavenly beings, ascribe to the Lord glory and strength. So,
Mine says sons of God, so like
Yeah.
he's talking to Israel. Give to him his due, sons of God, that's like a noun of direct address, Israel.
how do you get Israel?
Sons of God, that's what he's referring to.
I don't have,
It's not to whom, not God, but he's who he's directing this to.
Yeah. Well, and it's the same phrase we have in Genesis 6:2, where the sons of God saw the daughters of Adam. It's the same phrase, but and that phrase wasn't used in some of the other verses that we looked at today. So, and that's what we've really, and we worked at that a couple of weeks ago. What is this phrase, sons of God? Some think it's angels, some think it could be humans, but as we compare this to other passages,
it's mythical,
in mythical, it seems to think, well,
mythical language.
we've come up with divine beings.
Mm.
As opposed to when you say Israel, sons of God, you're viewing that phrase as humans, I think.
Yes.
And scholarship a long time ago, biblical scholarship, denounced that theory.
Family to God.
Yeah, right. Well, yeah, and that's where they've gone more with family of God, where the sons of God are part of the divine entourage, and not part of the people in ancient Israel. But some people have gone that way past. It's just the consensus of biblical scholarship is they haven't gone that way. And all that says is we can have ways of looking at it. Because that has raised a huge question, and we're out of time. But what are the sons? Who are the sons of God? And then when you start looking at that, now that phrase, Glenn, it appears in Job twice, and it appears here in Psalm 29, and it appears in Genesis 6. Okay. We will probably finish this up next week. And then we've been talking about going to another passage. So and one of the suggestions was Mark 9:2-13. So I've been working on that. So we will go to that. That is the transfiguration. Jesus goes up to the mountain with Peter, James, and John. And Jesus is transfigured, and then out of nowhere, we have Elijah and Moses, so we're gonna have some interesting things happening here. So if you're okay with that, at some point, I wanna have a discussion with you as a class. Do you wanna keep going with this, or do you want it where we apply exegetical aspects to different passages? Is that where this class is going, or do you wanna bring in some more themes we haven't discussed? So think about where you think you want this class to continue going. Okay? The class is going to worship. Okay, see you next week.